as we've seen in the past year, people are very passionate about, the government telling them what they can or can't do. I imagine the same is true in code enforcement, that, dealing with a situation where neighbors are feuding over a county ordinance or something that's on their property, uh, can be quite, dangerous sometimes, because people are very passionate about what's on their property. What kind of risks do code enforcement officers face?
Well, the risks that we face are serious in many cases, and unfortunately, they're on the rise. And you were right on the bullseye when you talk about people's. Sometimes there's a disagreement. They may have a fundamental disagreement with what we're trying to tell them. A lot of times, some of the risks that we face actually derive from not understanding the situation or lack of education. So when we meet with a property owner, they may just not understand the situation, and part of our job is to educate. But even with the education approach, where we try to be non-confrontational, that doesn't always get the point across, and we have to elevate our enforcement level. And that's when the risks start to increase even more. When we start talking about potential penalties or fines or other actions against the property owner that's going to negatively impact them, especially when it comes to perhaps hitting their pocketbook or their checkbook, the risks increase. We have many documented incidents of property owners who took retaliatory action against code enforcement officers, or who threatened code enforcement officers, merely because we pointed out a situation that we were responding to 99% of the time. We've received a complaint, and we are just addressing that complaint once we verify that there's a problem, and we have to find a solution to it. I say, like, threats, physical violence. We've had, unfortunately, code enforcement officers murdered in the line of duty just for doing their jobs. Fortunately, that does not happen often, but we have seen several in the last 5 years, unfortunately. But they range everything from physical threats, verbal threats, harassment on through social media, stalking through social media, or even showing up at a code enforcement officer's private home to confront them about why they did what they did, for basically just why they're doing their job.
I guess, to dealing with these safety concerns, what's being done to help, I guess, code enforcement officers protect themselves out there while they're working.
Well, we ultimately we hope that the local jurisdiction, the city or the county or the township that the code enforcement officers work for, hopefully providing some sort of training, or sending their folks to training to be able to help them learn how to deal with situations like this. But KCO, the actual organization, we have introduced SB 296 to the state legislature to create a minimum code enforcement officer training standard. And that's the real thrust of why we're here today, is to talk about that bill. We have introduced other safety bills in the past. We also provide a lot of officer safety training through our organization. There are other similar organizations that focus on officer safety training as well. So we're partnering with them to try to give our members and code enforcement officers actually throughout the state, whether they're a member or not, more access to good quality training and different types of training to really fill up that toolbox. So they don't have to resort to one method every single time, because not the same method does not work in every single situation.
Right. And I guess, what does SB 296 specifically do?
So SB 296 is a simple but yet very critical piece of legislation that we've introduced. It is basically a bill that requires local municipalities that employ code enforcement officers to also put together or create a training program that is specific to the duties of their code enforcement officers and the situations that they face on a regular basis, but that also fit the needs of their individual jurisdiction. It allows them the freedom to tailor their program to meet specifically their needs, versus trying to use a one-size-fits-all approach where a smaller town of, say, 5,000 residents will have different needs, and their officers will face different situations. So we put together a bill with Senator Limon to allow the local jurisdictions to have the control over what those programs contain, so it really does meet their specific needs, rather than trying to create this blanket that meets everybody's needs. And the beauty of it is it also allows them to control the costs at their level as well. So it's quite simple in its nature, but it's very, very critical.